We're going to be talking about muzzle conditioning. Muzzle conditioning is so important for every dog, but especially if you have a dog that's exhibiting a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of aggression. You definitely need to get that muzzle on that dog, especially in the areas that they struggle with. Even dogs that have not bitten or attempted to bite, if they are high fear or high anxiety, it's only a matter of time before they do attempt to bite. It's better to have the muzzle conditioning taken care of before you even get to that stage, rather than trying to muzzle condition a dog that's hit its breaking point, because it doesn't go nearly as well. So start muzzle conditioning now. It can be a really simple, fun game. Everybody's always looking for mental stimulation games for their dog or different ways to work their dogs for food. This is a great way to do it, whether you need the muzzle or not. So I'm going to show you the 3 steps to muzzle condition your dog. Your dog might not work through this as easily as Rocky, so we've made other videos on more advanced tips for muzzle conditioning, but I would say most dogs fall within these 3 simple steps and can be muzzle conditioned with this. Even if they are dealing with fear, anxiety, or aggression, I would say 85 to 90% of dogs will become muzzle conditioned just with these steps. So the very first step is getting the dog to put their face in the muzzle, okay? So I have Rocky's breakfast here right now. You're welcome to use treats and stuff. I highly recommend working the dog for their own food. If you're doing muzzle conditioning, spend 3 weeks and only feed the dog through the muzzle as if this is their new bowl. And you're gonna have way better results than if you're feeding treats on a dog that's already satiated. So I have Rocky's breakfast here. All I'm gonna do is I'm using a muzzle that has a hole in the bottom. So if you're using a muzzle that's totally closed off, this is gonna be a lot harder. Maybe find something with a hole in the bottom for training purposes. I know that Baskerville has a nice feeding hole. You can get Jafco muzzles with a nice feeding hole. Dean and Tyler muzzles are harder to feed through, but you can, just because it's just a cage type muzzle. You don't want to use any type of mesh muzzle that straps the dog's mouth shut. You're not going to be able to do anything effectively with that. So something that is a big wide open basket style muzzle with some type of feeding hole is going to be best for training purposes. You want to use that for your actual training. Maybe the dog can get this off, or maybe the dog can still bite through it in some way, or maybe it doesn't fit the dog appropriately. That's fine. You can use this for the training of it, but you can put on a different muzzle when the dog's comfortable wearing a muzzle. So we're gonna just get him sticking his face in it. Now I'm gonna be using one of my markers. I'm gonna use my YES marker whenever I want to tell the dog, you've done exactly what I was looking for, I'm going to reward you, okay? Even though he's gonna get some food in the muzzle, I'm still gonna reward him when he gets out. But my YES is marking that he's done exactly what I want him to do. And right now, all I want him to do is stick his face in the muzzle. So I'm gonna put the food down inside the feeding hole so that when he sticks his nose in, he can eat it if he wants to, okay? I'm gonna give him a YES the moment he sticks his nose in the muzzle. Yes. And I'm gonna feed him on the outside. If he got a kibble or 2 in there, I don't have a problem with that, but that's not my goal right now. My goal is just to get him to stick his nose in the muzzle. Yes. Ideally, you want the dog to choose to put their face in the muzzle. If they're having a really hard time understanding it, or they're really disinterested in putting their face in the muzzle, you might need to make them more hungry and show them that this is the only way that food comes. This is your food bowl now. So don't feed them over there and then expect the next day for it to be any different. Show them that food only comes through the muzzle, and you'll start seeing that dog peeking their nose into it. Yes. Good boy. So again, I'm just marking when the dog puts the nose into the muzzle. Yes. A lot of people want to race through this step too. You can spend a week or so in this phase. If your dog's already putting their face in the muzzle, spend a week there. Make it really enjoyable for them before you go on to phase 2. If your dog's really slow and hesitant to do this, get them more hungry, show them that food only comes through the muzzle, don't feed them in any other capacity, and maybe do this for a couple of weeks to make it more enjoyable. Yes. I'm gonna do one more rep. Oh my goodness. Yes, okay? So work on that 1 to 2 weeks, just depending on the type of dog that you have. Now we're gonna go to the second step, where we're going to start getting the dog to hold their face in the muzzle. This is gonna allow us to eventually do the straps, which is also part of step 2. But we want the dog to hold their face in the muzzle. So if you've taken our basic or intermediate foundation course, you know that our marker for hold it is good. Our marker for you're all done is YES. So now when he sticks his face in the muzzle, rather than immediately giving him a YES, I'm gonna give him a good. And that handful of food that I've been holding here but taking out and feeding him on the outside with, I'm going to let him eat inside the muzzle so he knows it's rewarding to keep his nose in the muzzle. And he's gonna start learning what that good marker means. So I'm gonna grab my handful of food. Good. Good boy. You can give that good as many times as you want to. Good. When he's almost done with the food in my hand, I'm gonna give my YES. Good boy. Yes. And I'm gonna give him another handful of food. Okay, so he's getting a handful of food for the good, and he's getting a handful of food for the YES, okay? He doesn't really know what he's getting rewarded for, or at least your dog won't. Rocky does. But all they'll know is that it's enjoyable to keep my head in there, and it's enjoyable when I take it out. Good. We're gonna go ahead and eat. Good boy. Good. When he's almost done, I feel like there's 1 or 2 kibbles left. Yes. We're gonna go ahead and take our hand out of there, okay? We're gonna do 1 more rep so you can see it. Handful of food. Good. Good boy. Good boy. Yes. We really want to encourage this step because this is what's gonna help the dog to not flail away as much when you try to do those straps. When they understand that the good marker means keep your nose in there, it's rewarding to keep your nose in there. Now, a way that we can start transitioning up to those straps is I'm going to feed with one hand, and rather than holding both of my hands at the end of that muzzle, I'm gonna slowly work up one strap just before I give that YES marker. So just before I feel that food is running out. Good. Giving my good marker, letting him eat. I'm gonna slowly work that strap up, and yes. Now you might have a dog that's a little bit more suspicious than Rocky, so you might just do the smallest little movement of that tassel or that strap before giving your yes. You might not actually try to move it all the way up over their head. Try to create as much trust as possible. So we're saying good boy, yes. And we'll go ahead and release. Good job. We'll do 1 more repetition of that. Good boy. And 1 quick swipe, yes. And we're gonna release his head out. Good job. Okay, so again, this isn't happening all in a day, right? You're not trying to just race and slap this on, because there are many dogs who are good-natured that will let you put a muzzle on the very first day, but if you go too quickly, they'll panic and have a bad experience with it, and then you have to undo a bad experience. Let's not even go there. So now I'm going to strap while I'm giving the goods, and I'm gonna try to fiddle with this buckle, right? I'm gonna take it a step further. I'm gonna hold it together, maybe even make it a little bit tight, see how the dog does while still giving that good marker, and then I will release the dog. We got a handful of food. You might wanna take a little bit of a bigger handful if you're gonna be fiddling for a while. Good. Giving my good marker, coming around here, making sure he's comfortable with the jingle, holding it a little bit, and yes. And again, if your dog's a little bit more suspicious, don't go quite as fast. Just go with just holding the strap there for a little bit, or maybe just picking up the buckle for a little bit. Whatever works for your particular dog. It's very much a feel kind of exercise. Good. So now, we're fiddling with that again. You might do this for a couple of days. Make sure that the dog's totally good with you fiddling around there. Yes. And the last step would be trying to actually strap the muzzle, okay? Now, once you strap the muzzle, you're going to have to change the way that you feed. Once the muzzle is strapped, we still want the dog to understand good, but you won't be holding your hand under that muzzle anymore. So what it's gonna look like is I have my first handful of food. I'm gonna give my good markers. I'm gonna fiddle with the straps. When he's done eating, I'm gonna slide both hands up and actually strap the collar. Once it's on him, I want him to understand it's still good. I strapped it, but we're still good. And I'm gonna go grab more handfuls of food and start feeding him through the muzzle so that he understands, okay, it's actually strapped to my face now, but this is still a good thing, hold it. So I'm giving my good boy. Good boy. When the food's almost out, I'm going to slide my hands up and strap this muzzle. Now, I'm just gonna strap it quickly, and I'm gonna give another good. And I'm gonna let him eat through that muzzle. Okay, you can do this maybe 1 or 2 times, but don't keep that muzzle on too long. What I normally do is maybe 1 feeding and yes, and I remove it. Okay, we'll show you that 1 more time. You're gonna have your small handful of food, have the dog put their nose in, good, give your good marker, grab your straps, Again, the dog should be fairly comfortable with keeping their head inside that muzzle at this point. And then just do a quick simple buckle or a clip, just depending on what you have, and another good boy. Let him eat through the muzzle. And then you can elongate this. You can feed, maybe even the whole meal here. Just feed through the muzzle, make this a good experience. You might spend a couple of days doing that, okay? This would be phase 2, getting the dog to keep their face inside the muzzle, whether you are holding it or it is actually strapped to them without getting a panic episode, okay? And then when we're ready, yes, we can reward for taking off. If you're dropping little pieces of kibble and you've actually gotten the muzzle on the dog, don't let them go down and try to get the pieces of kibble with the muzzle on. It's just going to frustrate them because they're not really going to be able to get it, and then they're going to be more likely to panic with the muzzle on. So if they're trying to go down and get the kibbles and they have the muzzle on, pull their head up with the leash. If they don't have the muzzle on, I don't care. They can go ahead and eat the kibbles on the floor. It's less that I have to clean up. But if the muzzle's on, just don't even let them get into that frustrated state. Just pull them up and then try to keep working with them, even if the kibbles are falling. So that's phase 2. The last phase is trying to get them to move in the muzzle. So getting them to stay in the muzzle isn't that complicated. Getting them to just sit there and eat their meal through it isn't that complicated. The hardest part of muzzle conditioning is getting them to move with it. So once we're in motion, we have a couple of different things that we can do. We can work with food for a little while, but it's not as great of an option as, our brains would like to think. We can work with food for a little while, but the hard part comes when the dog wants to sniff other things, when the dog wants to become nervous or fearful towards other things or aggressive towards other things. Then they start really going after the muzzle with their paws. So we're going to show you a couple of things that can work through that. So now I've got Rocky to the point where he's comfortable just letting me put it on. And we're ready to start moving with it. Something that you can do to try to help a little bit of motion is do some food lure work. You can try moving your dog just a couple of feet and then feeding. Nope. And then feeding there to help the dog understand how to move in it. And you can move a couple of feet and feed again. Help the dog understand to move with it, that it's not as stressful as it seems. I don't spend a lot of time in this phase unless a dog really needs it. And the reason I don't is because the more movement and feeding that you're doing, the more you're going to spill on the ground, the more frustrated the dog is going to get, and it usually just winds up amping the dog up rather than helping the dog settle. So you can spend a little time there helping the dog learn how to move with it, but don't get stuck there, okay? The easiest way is to just start getting the dog walking nice and slow. When you're walking, it's very likely that they're going to try to paw at it. When they try to paw, pull straight up on your leash and see if they just drop their feet. Most dogs will. They'll just drop their feet. So just pull on their leash, give a simple NOPE marker, and as soon as their feet go back down, give your good marker and encourage them. I like to use affection for this if I have a dog that's struggling to move with this a little bit more than food. But if you want them to move just a little bit and then give a little bit of affection, you can do that as well. Move just a little bit, give a little bit of affection. That can help the dog learn to not be so concerned with that. But you do have to work them through this process. So you might have to pull up on your leash many times. You might have to pull their feet off many times to help them get comfortable having this on a regular basis. My recommendation when you are muzzle conditioning is to try to put the muzzle on. If you do plan on leaving it on for a little while, try to put it on before pleasant things happen rather than before unpleasant things happen. So don't try to strap it on right before the vet visit, or strap it on right before you're going to introduce it to another dog, or strap it on right before you're going to try to do their nails. If that's always the relationship with the muzzle, then the dog is going to become more and more hesitant to wear it. So put it on right before you break out their favorite treat, right? And then you can kind of go ahead and feed the treat through the muzzle. Or put it on right before Great Aunt Lucy's gonna come over, and they love sitting with Great Aunt Lucy, and they can sit with Great Aunt Lucy with the muzzle on, or whatever it is. Obviously, you can't do any type of play with the muzzle on. That's just gonna wind up frustrating the dog. But maybe more simple events that the dog is looking forward to, you can precede them with the muzzle to help create a good experience. Most dogs, like I said, will be conditioned with this in these 3 simple steps, and you should be able to have a muzzle more regularly and for safety purposes when you need it down the road.